Lady Death is shaping up to be a major player in the MCU going forward, with Aubrey Plaza bringing her to life in Agatha all along. And Marvel Studios probably has some pretty huge plans for her, considering that in Marvel Comics, she's a really big deal. And there's been rumors that she could be getting her own Disney Plus show. We'll have to wait and see on that. But in the meantime, here's what you need to know about Death, or as she's sometimes called, Lady Death. Lady Death has been around in the Marvel Universe for decades, and even though she hasn't shown up in the MCU before, she plays major roles in the comics, and if Marvel Studios is taking influence from those stories, then we are in for a wild ride with her, especially because Aubrey Plaza is playing her. Lady Death was created by Jack Kirby and Joe Simon and first appeared all the way back in June of 1940 in issue 10 of Marvel Mystery Comics. As a cosmic entity, Death was created with the Big Bang that began the 7th Cosmos timeline. Death is often referred to as Eternity's twin, even though they have several other siblings. It's also said that God, the creator of Earth 616, only created Death as a necessity for his world to be accepted by the contractors. Following its creation, Death mainly stayed in the realm of death, home to the infinity well that gives her access to essentially infinite wisdom, as it allowed Death to have any question answered while consulting the combined wisdom of all the world's deceased. Despite being a cosmic entity who predates basically every character in the Marvel Universe, most people know Death from her arc with Thanos, or Deadpool, but we'll get to that. Death first appeared to Thanos as a young girl attending his school on Titan. Death was fascinated by the young Thanos, and following a personal tragedy, she saw her opportunity to have some influence on his life. A cave-in caused one of Thanos' friends to be killed by a group of wild animals that lived underground, but after this happened, Death led Thanos to the animals' nest and convinced him to slaughter them all. Following this, Death and Thanos became very close, and even though Thanos was romantically falling for Death, she had no interest in reciprocating. As Thanos grew older, his violent emotional coping got more and more vicious, spreading from wild animals to fellow Titanians, eventually getting to the point that he admitted to Death that he enjoyed killing and couldn't bring himself to stop. Despite several attempts to get Lady Death to fall for him, she repeatedly refused, eventually pushing Thanos to kill his own mother in an attempt to completely quench his thirst for murder. Unfortunately, it didn't work, and he banished himself in an attempt to isolate himself and prevent himself from remaining a serial killer. His abstinence didn't last long though, because after murdering a pirate captain in self-defense, Thanos decided to embrace his love of killing, which eventually caused Death to accept his advances and become his partner, but only on the condition that he proved he belonged to her, which he did by traveling planet to planet, slaughtering thousands of innocents in a hopeless effort to impress her. But as I mentioned, Thanos isn't the only character to have a romantic interest in Death, as Deadpool has also had some romantic run-ins with her. In fact, Thanos got so mad about this that he cursed Deadpool with immortality so they could never be together. Because you see, Death kind of actually prefers Deadpool. Why does Death love Deadpool so much? Well, as Deadpool would say, Death, the personification of death and the Grim Reaper, is in love with me, Deadpool, because she can't have my soul due to me not being able to die. I reciprocate my love for her, and so I try to figure out ways for me to lose my healing ability, die, and be with my beloved. Thanos, jealous because he understood Death preferred my love over him, cursed me with immortality so we can't be together. And this is true, but it doesn't necessarily stop them from being together. You see, Deadpool actually appreciates and sees Death for what she really is, and he sees her the way that she sees herself. You see, Deadpool was tortured over and over again. He has always gone through so much pain, and he genuinely wanted more than anything to die, for it to all be over, but he can't. And that's why he's always been in love with Death for what she actually is. A really sweet release from pain and injury and sickness. Deadpool wants to die. He wants what Death has, and not to just impress her, but he actually loves her for what she is. So Thanos curses Deadpool with immortality. And unfortunately, the only times that Death and Deadpool can see each other are when Deadpool has near-death experiences. But of course, he always ends up not dying. But in the comics, this story kind of comes to an end, and they give you two endings that you could follow. One is that Deadpool finally does die, and he basically becomes the king of hell, finally being able to be with Death. But the other alternate ending is him with Death, but he gets really fat, and one day she leaves and says she's gonna go have lunch with Thanos, but there's nothing to worry about, and the rest is left to your imagination. But I would really love to see Death and Deadpool, and possibly Thanos, since we are in the multiverse saga right now, interact with each other in the MCU. Thanos and Deadpool are the only living beings that Death has ever revealed herself to, but there's someone else named Walker that she revealed herself to, who was the god of a distant galaxy who tried to impress her by wiping out all of life in his entire galaxy. Throughout the Marvel Universe, Death has influenced many characters to kill others, usually hiding her true identity under an alias, a common one being Marlo Chandler. And while sometimes she has a cosmic reason for provoking murder, she often does it just out of boredom or curiosity. But she's a necessity of the universe because every universe that has life also needs death. As for Death's actual power level, she's one of the most ridiculously powerful beings in the entire Marvel Universe, which isn't that surprising given the fact that she is literally the personification of death itself. In fact, the Nova Corps have declared Death to be a universal and multiversal threat, although this doesn't mean that she's actively a threat to any universe. Death exists only to carry out the necessary functions that her universe demands, which doesn't necessarily make her malicious or evil. Sure, she's pushed the universe in certain directions before, with the most obvious example of that being her relationship with Thanos and all the death that came from that. But as for Death herself, she really doesn't have any intention of using her power to achieve any specific goals. Because Death isn't actually alive, that means that she also can't die. She's immortal. In fact, if Death were to die, that would require the cosmic rules of the universe to fundamentally change, since the universe can't exist without Death. But being the arbiter of death, Lady Death can also reverse earthly death and bring beings back to life, although she rarely does this since she really doesn't care much about life as a concept. One interesting aspect of Death's powers that may end up playing a part in the MCU's interpretation is the fact that certain beings have actually been able to challenge Death, most notably the Sorcerer Supreme. If someone is actually able to best Death, they can become immune to true death, which could end up being where the MCU is going if they intend on keeping Death around as a mainstay character. It's also worth noting that Death technically has the power to manipulate time and space, but rarely does it because it could upset the balance of the universe, and since Death is an essential part of the universe, that could end up endangering her own existence. Marvel has also left it intentionally vague as to whether or not Death in Earth 616 is the same Death in other universes, as Death can manifest herself in any form she pleases, so it's hard to determine whether or not these different visual representations of the character are actually different beings. Lady Death is a fascinating character because on one hand, she's one of the most powerful beings in the history of Marvel, but on the other hand, she's incredibly disconnected from the inner workings of the story. She has very little interest in getting involved with living creatures' lives, and even though she has incredible power, she's often dissuaded from using it due to the potential of her actions having unintended effects on the balance of the universe. Now, how Marvel Studios plans to implement her is another topic entirely, because obviously she can't have her arc with Thanos at this point, but with how she's being portrayed in Agatha all along, it seems like she may be taking a more active role in the multiverse saga than she usually does in her comic stories. Death, or Lady Death, is one of the most powerful beings in Marvel history and a crucial part of the Marvel Universe as a whole. Marvel Studios surely has some massive plans for her, and Agatha All Along is just the beginning. Only time will tell where her story is going to go on the big screen and the small screen, but with such a rich history to go off of, I really can't wait to see what Marvel Studios is cooking up. So please let me know what you think about Aubrey Plaza's death in the MCU, but also death in Marvel Comics. Also, let me know if you'd like me to go over more comic stories like this. Please leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you can stay up to date with the MCU and also learn about Marvel Comics. And you can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. As always, thank you all so much for watching. Woof woof.